In this session, we will learn how to create a database. I would first like to draw your attention to the server collation here, and I am on the home page of phpMyAdmin. If you notice the server collation UTF-8 MB4 underscore Unicode underscore CI. CI stands for case insensitive. The purpose of the collation is for the database to manage different types of character data. We have character encoding in our HTML web page and also in our external CSS style sheets. I would now like to draw your attention to the world database which we imported. So if I click on the world database, we know that there are 3 tables. If you look at the collation for those tables, you will notice it is different. It is general underscore CI as opposed to Unicode underscore CI. Now, the world database was developed several years ago, and at that point, this was the recommended collation. Going back to the home page here, now we have the Unicode version being the recommended collation. I am now going back to the world database. I would also like to point out that this is the general collation for the table. Inside the table, the different columns can also have a different collation. It will not really affect what we are doing. Again, it is something that the database uses behind the scenes. Now, when we look at the world database and see the 3 tables, notice that we have an option to drop. That is how you delete that table. That is the SQL drop command. We also have the ability to empty that table, and that is the SQL truncate command. And that means to remove the data. It does not remove the actual table. The insert command would allow us to insert 1 or more columns. The structure option allows us to look at the structure. I can also go to the operations tab and perform some other database procedures. Here I can drop the entire database. I can rename it. I can create a table. And I can change the collation and also change all the table collations if I wanted to. So now I am back at the home page in phpMyAdmin, and the first tab is the Databases tab. This is the easiest way to create a new database. Notice it shows me the databases that I already have. So we will create a test database. We have a default collation here, which I will change. You need to scroll down pretty far to get to the UTF-8 MB4 section, and then you need to scroll down further to find the Unicode underscore CI. I always recommend just playing around to begin with, so I am creating a database called test so that I can delete it if I make a mistake. So I code in my name, my collation, I click create. Now it's telling me there are no tables, and it gives me the opportunity to create a table. So I will create a test table, and you see the name here, and I will change the number of columns to 2, and now I will click go. Now we are taken into the screen where we will identify our column names and the data type and other important characteristics. This is the most important part of creating a database. Knowing what the columns are, knowing the data types, knowing which column is going to be your primary key, and knowing any other attributes that need to be set. I recommend writing all this down first on paper so that you have an idea of what you're doing ahead of time. It's always a good idea for the first column to be a primary key. However, you can always rearrange the columns later if you made a mistake. And I will make this a tiny int. And I'm not going to bother with the collation for the individual columns because I can set the collation for the table and the columns will inherit that. If you want to allow null values, you would check the box. Because this is the primary key, I'm going to indicate it here. And I will just take the defaults. I find that putting a size gives it error, so I leave it alone. AI stands for auto increment, and we will have an auto increment number here. And I don't need any more information. Most of these columns we really don't need to set. So I will just make this a name column, and I will make this a varchar. I'll say 50 characters. There is no default. There are no attributes. You can preview the SQL, and here we see create table, the table name, and we see the column, the values going into the first column, and the values going into the second column. Now I will click Save, and if everything goes okay, you are then taken into the Structure tab, where you can review your two columns. Notice it assigned us a tiny int of 4, which is fine. Auto increments technically do not have a collation. Notice this column inherited the table collation. We are not allowing null values. There are no defaults. Should you wish to change something, you may. Should you wish to delete this column, you may. If you check one of these columns, then you can also edit them. You can add more columns here, and you have the choice of where to place them. So now I am back to the home page in phpMyAdmin, and I can see there's my test database and there's my test table. In the event that you can't see these, you can refresh the navigation pane. When I click on the test database, it shows me there is one table in there, and it shows me some information about that table. Again, I have the ability to do some editing here. If I were to click the plus sign next to my table, it shows me the columns and indexes, and I can see my two columns here. Should I wish to go back and edit something in my column, I can just click on the column. It will show me the different attributes in the Structure tab. Supposing I wanted to change the name to ID_number, or actually I'll make it _num, and I can preview the SQL and I can save it. Now you see that we have just changed our column name. So by clicking on the column names, you have the ability to modify the columns. Now when I click on the database, it automatically opens it in Browse View, and we see a Select All query being run. However, I have no data. So how do we get data into this table? We do that using the Insert tab. Remember, you need to be selected in the navigation area here in order to manipulate the correct table. So here I am selected my test table, and I am in the Insert tab. You can see on the left my column names and the data types. So I can type in some values. By default, it gives you 2 rows. So I will only add 2 names because my first column, ID_num, is an auto increment. I can preview the SQL here. And if you recall, we did learn how to use the SQL insert command. And now I can click Go. It shows me that 2 rows were inserted. Now if I go back and click on my database name, here we see the IDs and the 2 names. Again, we have the ability to do some editing here, should we need to do that. We also can go into the Operations tab, and we have some ability to edit our table because the table is selected. Should we select the database and then go into the Operations tab, we have some ability to edit the database, including dropping it or deleting the whole thing. So if you wanted to get rid of your test database, this is how you would do it.